Hello, I'm Lydia, and you're listening to Lens from the Fens. Hello everyone, welcome to this episode for Lens from the Fens. I hope that you're all well and have been enjoying the recent weather we've had across the UK. And if you are listening from abroad, then welcome, and I hope you are experiencing nice weather as well. So if you've had the chance to see my work, which is found on pinfoldphotographic.co.uk, you'll notice that a lot of my images portray different species of birds. Not only are they very noticeable in the Fens, but I've always had a fascination with them from quite a young age. I remember one of my first pets was a budgerigar that I independently looked after. I called him Simpson from the well-known cartoon series. And it was actually during my art and design course where we were learning to do studies of people, objects, and whatever we had in the house or nearby. And Simpson was one of my subjects, and I remember I just marvelled at all the different markings he had on his plumage, all the details around his face and across all his feathers. So that's probably one of the earliest I remember, if not just the amount of nature documentaries that I've seen from around the world. Things like the sea eagles, where they glided over the water level just centimetres from the top, and then they would use their talons just to grab fish right out of the water. Others, I remember watching the speed of peregrines as they hunted for seabirds on cliff faces. Again, we said that was in the UK. And then a bit further away, the David Attenborough series where they looked at birds of paradise. It's just amazing to see or trying to find out how they courted the females, the different dances they made, their fluorescent feathers, how they shined like up from the forest floor. So yeah, I think in terms of how wide and varied bird species are, that's probably one of my key pointers as to how I came to enjoy just seeing birds of all sorts. So although I heard and read a lot about different types of birds from different countries around the world, either it be from nature documentaries or from books that I read from a young age, it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I realised that I didn't actually know very much about the birds that lived close to me, the different types of birds that lived or hunted nearby. So with that in mind, from January 2019, I chose to volunteer with the RSPB, which is the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, and I ended up volunteering at a place called Frampton Marsh, which is just south of Boston, so it's still within the Fenland area, and I thought it would be a really good place to know more about the birds that either stay all year round or ones that visit during the summer and the winter months. So a little bit of history about this reserve. The RSPB took over the land in 2009 to dedicate it as a nature reserve. This came around due to the majority of fens and marshes around the area being used for agriculture, and in turn this removed vital habitats for both resident and visiting birds. And over the past 10 years, the site has been really successful in terms of providing a haven for the ever-growing number of bird species that visit this reserve. And it's also been really good at informing the public of how it is vital that we keep the majority of the natural spaces as natural as possible to ensure that our native and resident birds are protected for future generations to come. So I have always admired the work that the RSPB have done for wildlife in general. I just find it to be a really good organisation to not only engage with other bird enthusiasts, people interested in nature in general, but we can learn a lot more about our visiting and resident birds, and that can even lead on to having some rare sightings where rare breeds of birds can come. And we actually had a successful breeding for a rare grebe species last year, which was really exciting, not just for the reserve, but to know that the RSPB is doing, or they set out exactly what they wanted to do, to provide an ideal habitat for not just the birds that we see every day, but birds that otherwise not a lot of people would have heard of. So it was from the beginning of me volunteering at the start of last year, where I recorded the birds that I saw just at the reserve. But over time, I actually ended up recording anything and everything I saw every day, wherever I travelled to, whether that was just from in the garden, travelling to and from work, travelling to my parents or other family members. I just ended up recording everything I've seen since then, and I just find it really nice to look back on it and remember seeing a bird for the first time, remembering what date it was, and then those certain dates where it was just a surprise to see a certain bird species. So one day, on the day back in 2019, I think it was summertime, I think it was June, I went for a mammal photo trip, and it was actually on that trip that I saw quite a rare bird, which was a great grey shrike. It was totally unexpected, and I obviously didn't hear of it at the time, but when it was pointed out by the guide and he pointed it out to the rest of the group, it was just really exciting, and it was nice to have it recorded because I can look back on that day and remember what I saw. And it's just even if it's just general birds that I see in the garden, it's still nice to look back on it and just see all the birds that I witness myself every day, if not at home, then elsewhere. So just going back over the notes I first made when I started volunteering, so for my first visit, I actually saw quite a lot of types of water birds that I either didn't see or I didn't notice closer to home. So some of them that I've written down were teal, widgeon, pochard, peregrine, which was quite exciting. It was distant, but I recorded it. Goldeneye, black-tailed godwit, which was actually one of my first wading birds that I remember recording within this area of the UK. And then just continuing through the months, I remember recording my first sighting of a Marsh Harrier, again something that I haven't noticed closer to home. Great white egret, that was quite exciting, I think not just for me but for the other RSPB staff and people who visited. And then we go on to shoveler, which is probably one of my favourite breeds or species of duck at the minute, just because their plumage is really bright and vivid, and their bills are obviously a lot more longer and flatter to sift through the mud and water to get the nutrients they need. And then just carrying on, I've recorded chiffchaff, blackcap, pintail, redshank, avocet, curlew, dunlin, and a cuckoo, which I remember very well seeing. It flew over the visitor centre, the building that I stay in when I do my volunteering. So that was really exciting, and again, it's nice that I have recorded it, just something to look back on in future years. So that's just a small collection of what I recorded for my first time at the reserve. And then, yeah, as I said earlier, I now record everything else that I see elsewhere. So even my own garden, other people's garden, other reserves I visit, photo trips, and to and from the workplace. And as a whole, this actually gave me something to focus on, because the last couple of years I struggled with mild depression, and a lot of the time now I see nature as a relief from that, and it's just ideal to escape to that, to hear birds, to focus on picking out a bird from a distance with either my scope or my binoculars. So it's just nice that I can find myself really relaxed and focus on something else rather than being in quite a low mood, and it then later on leading to just not feeling like doing anything, not feeling motivated to go out or just do simple tasks at home. So it's definitely something that I use to get myself focused for the day before I start work, and then from there I can just be just a bit more motivated to do other activities. So as a whole, I do recommend recording either birds or animals in general. It's great for all ages. Young children can learn more about wildlife from an early age, and it's also something that adults can start to do as well. Even if it's something as simple as starting in your own garden. One thing I could recommend if you want to start doing that is taking part in the RSPB Big Garden Birdwatch, which happens at the end of January every year. But it is an all year round recording, so you can simply spend half an hour in the morning before you start work seeing what birds land in your garden. And yeah, you can then use a bird ID book, which is always quite handy, especially if a bird lands and you're not quite sure what it is, or even better, take a picture. And if you're a part of any social media groups where it's to do with bird watching or local nature in your area, then you can send that in and ask other people what it could be, and then you can just communicate with others and share other sightings that you see. And then from there, if you really want to, you can then go to your local park, especially now that we only have one course of exercise a day. Just go to your local park if you can, see what flies above you. You can start to recognise calls. And I think that this will be my next episode. In my next one following this, I will provide some short clips of different types of bird calls within the fens, but I think a lot of the common birds are in everyone's garden across the UK and elsewhere. So I can provide some of the common bird calls, calls that I'm familiar with, and then calls of birds that I have managed to see myself. But potentially a lot of people may not know the sounds that they make. So yeah, I think that will be what my next episode entails. So in terms of my recent sightings, which I'll go through, a lot of them at the minute are just based on going to and at my workplace. It means I'm still able to work there, but just on reduced hours. So leaving from home, obviously I have the open fields, which provides a very wide scope as you're travelling along the road. So from here, I'm able to easily see pheasants feeding on the ploughed fields that the farmers have made, plenty of corvids, so jackdaws, rooks, and the carrion crow are often at the side of the road. Black-headed gulls, they are well and truly here at the minute, and they're normally sitting where the farmers are currently ploughing the fields, and they're obviously picking out all the bits of food that they can get from the overturned soil. And as well as the bird sightings, I sometimes record the mammals I see as well. So in the past few weeks, I've been able to spot hares running across the fields, and also small groups of roe deer, which is just as nice to see as I would when I normally see the birds on their own. So my place of work is heading into Nottinghamshire. So as soon as I leave the outskirts of Peterborough, heading west, immediately there are hills everywhere. So it's a bit of a very stark contrast to obviously where I live and where I've travelled from. And in turn, that does limit my scope over the fields. But in turn, the skies are still very open and above. So when I'm on the clear road, I'll often catch sight of buzzards or red kites, which are circling above the road. Normally they'll potentially look for roadkill, because unfortunately sometimes pheasants do run across those roads at different times of day. So they're obviously on the lookout just in the morning through to the evening. And another bird that I have recorded recently is the red-legged partridge. Again, they're more often at the side of the road, either where they've just crossed where the pheasants go. And they're a really nice bird. I do like the patterns and the colours that they show. So it does make them easy to spot, especially when out from the undergrowth there you can just see them in full view. So when I arrive at my place of work, I'm quite privileged as to where my workstation is. The area that sits outside of my window is just a pure green patch with trees that line across the main road in front, and with the changing seasons and all the leaves and bulbs that are coming out of the branches, it is just a whole wall of green foliage at the minute, which is really nice. It's welcoming quite a few regular visitors, and there's often the wood pigeons that hop amongst the trees, and they'll come to the grassy patch where all the birdseed is, and then the magpies often come in as well, and a couple of other regular visitors are great tit, blue tit, robin, one of which has a bit of the leucistic colours on his head, so that's where a bit of pigmentation in the animal's fur or feathers is just turned white. So he's quite noticeable, so I know that he or she is a regular visitor. And more recently, I have also heard the calls of a blackcap, which is really nice to hear, even if it is near such a busy part of the main road. And in turn, the red kites are also still, they circle overhead, and I can often see them lining the tops of the trees as they fly by. And another mammal that I see quite regularly now is a grey squirrel, again near my workplace. There's been about 3 that I've visited, and yeah, they just obviously use the trees lining the road to get to and from the places, and they've managed to work out that food is being put down there. So as well as seeing the mammals such as the grey squirrel, it's just nice that I'm able to see more of the birds that I enjoy seeing, either at home, at the reserve, and just any other places I go locally. So as I said earlier, doing this exercise where you record birds or even mammals, it doesn't have to be birds. If you see more mammals in your area, then by all means you can just record the mammals you see, or even invertebrates. You can do a list of pretty much anything in terms of the wildlife in your area. Yeah, it's just a really good exercise that anyone can take up. You can either be, if you are self-isolating at home, you are stuck at home, just look in your garden and take note of what sort of birds visit your garden. Obviously, it's nice to have the bird feeder out with the different types of seed, suet again, and just from that you can easily spot where we have regular visitors. At the minute, I've had a few jackdaws actually visit the bird feeder, and one of them has quite a lot of white patches. Again, I don't know if it's where the pigmentation is lost and he is or she is leucistic, but again, it's just nice to recognise certain individuals that visit your garden. And I've heard other stories where other types of corvids or regular garden bird visitors have been, and they can easily recognise them either from their calls or if they have a certain irregular feature on them. So yeah, again, for any age, you can get the kids involved, get them learning about different types of birds that you have visiting your garden, your local area. If you do your exercise there, again, just take note of what birds you hear, what you see on the ground in front, what you can see soaring in the skies above. I mean, it's endless what you can record. And then even better, taking pictures. If there is a bird you're not sure on, try and get a picture either on your phone or if you do have a proper camera to use. And yeah, you can easily share the image and say, oh, this bird visited, can you help me identify it? If not from social media, then you can easily find it in a bird ID book. Again, different retailers sell it. The RSPB have their own as well. So you can always check on their website if you want any help with getting the correct food for your birds. And there's also a lot of help with IDing all the birds within the area or the local area of the fens, or further afield. They have the map of all the different reserves. So yeah, although we are pretty much restricted on when we can go right now, it's definitely, you can start small, you can start local, and then when there's a chance that restrictions are lifted across the country, then you can go through the different locations that you want to visit, depending on if it's a bit further afield or if there's a type of bird or animal species there that you want to encounter. then you can go there hopefully in the not too distant future. I certainly plan to go to a few places where I want to see different types of bird species, just to either get pictures or just to record it again for my own pleasure. So yeah, it's something anyone of any age, any ability can take up, and it can be something nice to look back on in years to come, or to show family members as well. So I hope you enjoyed this episode about why I list birds every day and where that started from. I think going back to recording different bird calls from the fens, I'll be happy to do that as my next episode. I'll start with obviously some of the common garden birds that I get, and then some of the calls that I've managed to hear in different areas of the fens. So I'll keep you updated with that. I can get that out within the next week. I'm going to try and do a weekly episode for you all. Just given the circumstances we are in, I am limited to what I can do outside of just talking about stories and things like that. But I think when that changes and I'm able to go elsewhere, it'll be really nice to take you to one of the reserves, either a local reserve or something that I'm visiting for the first time, and be able to record all the sightings and just record myself as things happen. So yeah, hopefully in the not too distant future, I'll be able to do episodes of that kind as well. So thank you all for listening. Again, all stay safe, wash your hands, and I will speak to you all again very soon. My podcast cover shows my own image created using Canva. The theme music is provided by Purple Planet Music. Check out their royalty-free music at purple-planet.com.